Hi, hello, and welcome. Welcome to another Marty's Minute Meditations. Welcome to this space, this realm, this energy. Enter through the doorways of your soul so that our spirits may converge. If you're a new listener, just dropping in for the first time, thanks for coming aboard our spaceship. Marty understands it takes bravery and courage to step into the unknown. You may be scared and confused. Who's this Marty? What are these Menitations? And why do you call them a minute if they're clearly far longer than that? Well, to answer your questions, I am this Marty, and a meditation is a meditation on the sacred masculine, which lies within all of us. And they're a minute in the grand scope of our existence. They may be 30 minutes, 40 minutes, but compared to the length of our lives, they only feel like a minute. Now that I've answered all of your queries, I want to welcome you to this space. This is a space where we question and explore the greater ponderances of our society, where we break down the barriers that separate us from each other and seek to purify ourselves from the toxicity of our modern society. And we do that in a fountain of love, listening, and learning. And Marty wants to thank you for coming aboard this spaceship. This spaceship is going to unknown galaxies, unexplored planets. Are you ready to explore the unknown? If you're an old listener, thanks for coming back. I kept your spot on this spaceship warm. Don't worry, I would never give it away. You've been brave enough to continue to take these journeys with Marty, and so he wants to keep your spot warm and available. It's so great to feel your spirit here with me again. It truly makes Marty full of life and wonder. So thank you for coming back. I sense some of you out there who are a little frustrated. Marty, where have you been? We haven't heard from you in so long. Marty acknowledges that he has been absent from this space and has seemingly disregarded his spiritual duties. But he needed to cleanse his body, mind, and spirit of some negative thoughts. You know, Marty sends these meditations out into the world, and he doesn't know where they go or how people receive them. He doesn't even know who receives them. Sometimes he thinks that no one's listening to them, and Marty gets very negative, alright? He starts to tell himself he's worthless. Marty, you suck. No one loves you. No one listens to your meditations because you're awful. Well, that isn't very helpful, is it? Especially if he wants his voice to reach the ears of all different types of people. Those negative thoughts can be the psychological prison that holds him back from manifesting beauty in this world. So he has to think positive. He has to imagine that all sorts of people are listening to his meditations. In Marty's brain space, he can imagine some very grounded and influential people listening to Marty's Minute Meditations. Maybe Russell Brand or Aubrey Marcus, or maybe even Canadian goddess and pop star Carly Rae Jepsen. Oh my goodness. Marty's getting nervous just thinking about it. I mean, I might have manifested that in this very moment. She might be eagerly waiting for every episode that comes out. Marty would love that. Because Marty's going to admit it. He has a little crush on Carly Rae Jepsen. And if she enjoyed his meditations, well, that would be just wonderful. That would be nice. In that case, hi, hello, and welcome, Carly, and thank you for listening to my meditations. So Marty took some time to sort his thoughts out and prepare himself for his next journey into this realm of ideas. You may have been like, Marty, we've needed you more than ever, and you just disappeared. Don't worry, Carly. Marty's back, and he has a lot to talk about, that's for sure. And lastly, if you enjoy Marty's Minute Meditations, please consider becoming a martyr for manhood. You can visit Marty's Patreon page and become a monthly donor. You'll receive all sorts of different benefits, like a list of videos, music, and books that are inspiring Marty for the month, or a personalized mantra written and recorded by Marty just for you, or even access to unreleased content. That sounds like a lot of fun. If you don't like making a commitment, that's okay. Marty understands. That's why he has a PayPal account and a Buy Me a Coffee account, where you can just drop by and allow your spirit to give gratitude. by providing me with $1 an episode. That's all Marty asks. Marty will give you a shout out in his next meditation as an honorary member of his meditationship. If you can't support Marty in that way, then just tell your friends and family about Marty's Minute Meditations. You'll be doing them a huge favor by opening the doors of our spaceship for them, and you will be helping to spread the word of Marty in the process. Now, with all that being said, let's begin today's episode of Marty's Minute Meditations. Are you an obedient citizen? Do you follow the rules, adhere to society's social structure and limitations, believe that being obedient makes you a morally good person? Are you an obedient citizen? Do you sense the glaring eyes of the overseers watching and judging everything you do, striking fear and anxiety into your heart, holding your heart back from offering its beauty and energy to the world? Are you an obedient citizen? When you see someone doing something that society deems as wrong, do you point your finger at them? Do you take it upon yourself to maintain a hegemony? When you see something, do you say something? What is an obedient citizen? What is being obedient? It's obeying. But who is being obeyed, and what good is it to obey? For a long time, being an obedient citizen meant obeying God. People always believed that the eyes of God were upon them, watching their every move, and always ready to throw them into the hells for any wrongdoing. Marty can certainly relate to that feeling. When Marty was young and he was becoming curious about his sexuality and the beautiful benefits of his God-given body, he was limited in his journey by the gaze of God. Maybe he would feel his body getting excited and he would want to take that opportunity to venture into this unknown territory. But Marty would deny himself because he felt the eyes of God watching him. Maybe it would get to the point where even the feeling or the thought scared Marty. His little lingam would become excited. It would wake up and little Marty would go, "No, lingam, go away. Don't be so hard. Don't tempt me. God is watching. You're putting me in a very difficult position, you tempter, you tempting lingam." Marty felt like he was a sinner just for having a lingam and a sexuality that God gave him. He felt the need to apologize for his feelings, for what he naturally was, because he didn't want to be seen as a bad person. Do you feel like you are disobedient just for being who you naturally are, for feeling what you naturally feel? Some may say that God was the first true police person. He didn't have to come down to earth with a gun or a badge because people feared him so much that they would deny themselves certain experiences. They would follow the rules and the laws, and of course that God is seen as a man. Oh, how typical that God is seen as a man, violent and punitive. And men, we should be offended by that. Women get offended by the fact that God is so often seen as a man. But whenever God is seen as a man, it's always when he is violent and vengeful. Whereas when God is personified as a woman, she is seen as life-giving and gentle. Why aren't we offended by that, men? It seems like we have a little sexism considering God here, But whether God is a man or a woman or a non-gender conforming individual, one thing is for sure. God was seen as the first true police person. And they probably didn't even want to be the first police person, but people just made them the police person. God's going to be angry. God's going to punish you. They're watching you. You better do the right thing. The thing that we as a society say is right. Because it wasn't God creating these laws or rules, right? No, it was the people. God just wanted us to be nice to each other and enjoy this wonderful, beautiful gift of the world. The people who had power, though, They wanted obedience. And how do you create obedience without police persons? That's right. Marty wants to talk about the police persons. It's a very sensitive topic. Marty understands. People have their own perspectives and beliefs surrounding it. Some of you may be going, we don't need the police at all, Marty. And if you believe we do, you're a supremacist and a corporatist and a capitalist. Others may be saying, Marty, of course we need the police. You're crazy and naive if you think otherwise. You live in a magical land where people can be trusted. Well, Marty wants to see it from a different perspective. A perspective that may feel a bit uncomfortable, right? Because it's not so cut and dry, all right? It's a little complicated, just like life. So if you're easily offended by other perspectives, there's no judgment, but he would suggest that you turn off the podcast. Some of you may be going, yeah, Marty, you tell it like it is, right? Give it to the man. Expose the police peoples. Well, while you're cheering, what you don't realize is that you are also a police person. That's right. You are also someone who upholds a power structure, who limits freedom in the name of a morality. You too are part of the police people problem because you're part of the police people force. Whoa, Marty, that's a pretty big accusation. I'm not happy about you saying those things because they just aren't true. I don't have a gun. I don't have a badge, Marty. I don't go around trying to oppress people because I have the authority. Well, being a police person isn't necessarily about being an officer of the law, but it may be about policing from the mind. You know, within our minds, within the society and city of our minds, there's a little police department with an officer sitting at their desk. They kick their feet up while they drink their coffee and they stroke their gun. Except because it's in the mind, it's not a real gun. No, it's a psychological gun. This is what people might see as the toxic masculine, the man who's ready with a weapon to attack, who becomes drunk from power and maintains order by any means necessary. Their ego is stronger than their heart. And for all you ladies and non-gender conforming individuals out there who are going, yeah, men are the problem. Sorry, but you have an officer in your mind too. You have some toxic masculinity in you too. And before you get offended, just hear Marty out, okay? He's not blaming you. He's saying that we've all got a little bit of toxicity in us. The toxic masculine is a behavior, an energy that is not just limited to men, okay? All sorts of people could be toxically masculine. We all have this officer in our mind. Marty has an officer in his mind. Old Officer Marty, that's right. Officer Marty's been on the beat for a long time. He's seen some stuff, been through some things. Most of all, Officer Marty has become jaded. Whenever Officer Marty sees something, he can only see it as a crime, as a disobedience. When civilian Marty's walking down the street, Officer Marty steps in to uphold the laws of the land. Maybe Officer Marty sees someone walking down the street without a mask on. Already, I sense the response from that. Some people are going, my goodness, how awful. Someone walking down the street without a mask. Others are going, good for that person. They don't need to wear a mask outside. Even science says you don't need to wear a mask outside. Well, Officer Marty doesn't trust science, okay? He gets mad because that person's doing something wrong, right? Seems pretty clear to Marty that that person doesn't care about people. So what does Officer Marty tell Civilian Marty to do? You should say something. And Civilian Marty goes, but that's just a child walking down the street, minding their own business. And Officer Marty steps in and says, oh no, Marty, if you see something, you have to say something. What does it say about you to other people if you don't? It's your responsibility to keep the world safe, to make sure people follow the rules. So what does Marty do? Marty goes up to little Billy, who's not wearing his mask outside, and he goes, excuse me, young man, because Marty likes to be polite. Would you please put on your mask? And little Billy acts all dumb like he can't talk, like he's too young to respond. But Officer Marty knows for sure that little Billy killed someone's grandma because he wasn't wearing a mask. So because Marty's brave and he's a hero, Marty says, hey, little Billy, you better put your mask on, you little murderer gallivanting down the street without a care in the world. And little Billy would be confused and scared, tears welling up in his eyes, because sometimes murder is just murder without knowing that they're murdering, especially when they're little kids. But it's time to grow up, Billy. You have a lot more responsibility now, okay? It's a brave new world. You may have already killed up to 20 people. Are you going to pay for those funeral fees, Billy? Are you going to visit each family and apologize that you murdered their grandparents, their obese uncle, that cousin that has an autoimmune deficiency? Well, you better wear a mask when you do it, because an apology doesn't mean anything when it's bathed in a virus. And someone would film the whole altercation and post it on YouTube, and people would start to see how brave I am and that I'm a hero. I mean, Marty has to set an example for the rest of the world. How is he going to convince people to be heroes if he doesn't act like one himself? Marty needs to be an idol for people to look up to. Let me tell you, Marty would get a lot of likes on that video. That's not why he did it in the first place. Marty doesn't police for the likes, okay? He polices for the good of the world. He would even get a bunch of comments that said, "Marty, you're so brave and courageous. It's a good thing we have police persons like yourself to keep us safe from the Billies of the world." And just in case you're wondering, yes, little Billy is a cisgendered white boy. And that's why he doesn't care about the livelihoods of others. Not because he's 5. He's a white boy. He knows better at any age. And that's why Officer Marty always has to be vigilant and keep an eye out for Caucasian boys. Now, you may be offended that Officer Marty seems to discriminate against little white boys, but he doesn't trust them in his neighborhood. All right? Spoken like a true police person, huh? But we all walk the streets with this police person in our minds, allowing our fears and discomforts to guide our judgments, and interpreting those feelings as proof of someone's guilt, of their disobedience. You may be saying, well, Marty, I don't see the problem with calling out little Billy's disobedience. He wasn't wearing a mask outside, and there's really no debate on the validity of masks. You're right. There's no debate at all on the validity of masks. But what if we discovered that the virus was spread through something like picking your nose? What then? That's a big one. How would we police persons deal with that situation? And before you go, ha ha ha, Marty, really funny. It's pretty silly that picking your nose would be a problem. Well, our world is getting pretty silly, don't you think? For all you know, there might be scientists out there saying, yes, picking your nose is helping to spread this virus. I've been trying to tell the world that it's a huge problem. But the mainstream media has been keeping the lid on certain truths and therefore keeping real information from the people. So you don't know. Maybe someone is policing those scientists. What would our world look like if that were true? Would digging for gold, which is a euphemism for picking your nose, be labeled as an act of biological terrorism? Would the public demand that we place cameras in everyone's homes to see who in our communities can't keep their fingers out of there? Well, we don't have to worry about that because we have already voluntarily placed cameras in our homes, on our computers, and on our phones. We live in our own little police state, don't we? Now, instead of an imaginary God looking over us, we're actually being watched by the God of society. And people love it as long as it's used to enforce their laws and rules. We hate policing until it's for something that we believe should be policed. If they see someone do something, they get to film it and show the world. Film this guy picking his nose at the Starbucks. Here's his name and home address. If you don't show up at his home and protest him, then you're part of the problem. People start scraping little boogies off of the chairs and tables and walls as evidence. Oh yeah? You deny picking your nose? Well, Your Honor, we have a bag of evidence right here, and his DNA is all over these boogies. Ooh, it's a brave new world, huh? Not much of a democracy. We didn't get to vote on whether we wanted cameras in our homes, cell towers in our backyards, or billion-dollar corporations keeping all of our information for their own benefit. I don't remember voting for any of that. Not that Marty votes, because it's all a facade anyway. I mean, everyone knows that. We all know that the decisions have already been made by the capitalist corporatist monopolies out there. But if we were given the choice to vote for all those meaningful things instead of a face that hides the dirty dealings of the world, then maybe Marty would actually vote. But this government and this society, they all want to make little police persons out of us. They want to make sure that we don't think on our own and that we have an image of what criminal means to us. They want to put us in our own little groups to become blindly passionate about policing peoples. This way the government can let us do the dirty work for them. Marty, whose side are you on here? You always send mixed signals. Mixed signals, Marty, is what we call you back at the office. All of us people who work at that office, we talk about your meditations all the time, but we're so confused because, you send mixed signals. Because you're mixed signals, Marty. Marty isn't on a side because he believes that being on a side is part of the problem. That's right. Both sides are wrong. Whoa. I guess both sides are getting pretty angry right now. Well, Marty doesn't give a darn, okay? He's telling it like it is. People who say someone is on the wrong side of history, that person's on the wrong side of history, okay? Besides, it's not your call to say someone is on the wrong side of history. That's for the future people to decide. And they may end up saying you were on the wrong side of history, but you don't know that yet because your present hasn't become the past. In the future, when it becomes the past and you're already dead and gone, all those future people may say you were on the wrong side of history. They'll dig your body up and parade you through the streets as some awful person. Ooh, that'll be a brave new world, huh? That's why Marty wants to be cremated and his ashes to be scattered amongst the forest where he met his soulmate. He hasn't met her yet, but Marty imagines that it will be in a beautiful forest. And I'll see her in a clearing. Marty can already see her. She's in a beautiful long sundress. Her hair is cascading down her back. Butterflies are flying around her. And I feel the butterflies in my tummy too. Starting to feel that connection, that love connection. And she can sense my presence behind her, so she turns to look at me and, oh my goodness, it's Carly Rae Jepsen, the Canadian goddess and pop star. What are you doing here in this forest, Carly? You came here to find me? You left your homeland of Canada in order to find me here in this forest? You didn't have to do that, Carly. You could have just asked me. Marty would move for you, Carly. Marty would move in a heartbeat. Marty, get back on track, okay? This is a serious conversation you're having here about policing, and you're being distracted by the thoughts of Carly Rae Jepsen. You're right. But Marty shouldn't have to apologize about his daydreams, all right? You shouldn't have to police Marty's thoughts here, all right? Marty does that enough for himself. So in this dystopian world, people would be imprisoned and punished for picking their nose. Picking their own nose. Some people out there are going, picking your nose is just disgusting anyway, Marty. Just use a tissue. You only think that because you're brain soiled by the whitewashed and supremacist world. Seems like you would be one of the first people to join this war on nose picking. A follower of the nose Nazis, the booger KGB over here. You would lead the charge on limiting our freedoms. The government would force us to plug up our noses for the safety of others, and you would be on the streets making sure people obeyed. Well, it's just the right thing to do, right? If people just obeyed, you wouldn't have to attack them on the streets. You wouldn't have to police them in the first place. And when would it end? When would we be able to unplug our noses, When are we able to finally get our fingers back in there? When do we get our physical autonomy back? Yeah, a lot of you are going, oh, please, Marty, don't get all upset. Don't try to compare this to something like abortion. Marty's not. But whether you like it or not, it's physical autonomy all the same. And if you're going, well, sometimes we have to give up our autonomy to ensure the safety of others. Well, then you don't really care about physical autonomy, do you? Your paranoia, the uncertainty of your spirit is far more important to you than an individual's physical autonomy. So when would we get our full physical autonomy back? That's what Marty would like to know. When would our nostrils be free from the oppression of our police state? When the virus is completely gone? Well, that won't work, because even then, we might be one little boogie away from another full-blown pandemic. So then we'll never be able to pick our noses again. And how long would you be that police person trying to stop people from picking their nose, Until one day you're sitting in your living room and you feel something hard in your left nostril. And all you could think is, wouldn't it be great to just get my finger in there for a second? Just a moment, not too long. I wouldn't really be picking it. It would be more like rubbing it, right? Just a little rub, a little scratch, a nudge to remove that discomfort. You're trying to justify doing something that you've labeled as a crime, but because you need to do it, it really isn't a crime to you anymore. When in reality, it shouldn't have been a crime in the first place. So you start to wiggle your nose around until your government-mandated nose plug pops out of there and into your lap. Oh no, my nose isn't blocked. I guess I have to put it back in there. And before you put that nose plug back in, you just get in that nostril for that 1 second, and you get in there and you get out that boogie. And what do you feel? relief, freedom, true freedom. Well, that's what you should feel. But then your neighbor, who saw you rub your nose, who sees themselves as a police person of the neighborhood, alerts the authorities and you go to prison for being a murderer. But we all should have the right to pick our noses. No government or authority has the right to keep our fingers out of there. Sorry. Marty feels very passionate about our own physical autonomy, all right? We've been deprived of a connection to people because of the police persons. We long to touch, but we're filled with fear and mistrust. The officer in our minds wants to put up police person barriers, put on riot gear, put down spike strips to pop the tires on our soul mobiles. They want to limit ourselves, our truth, and our connection to other human beings. We all see it. When people walk down the street these days, they try to avoid each other. Walk onto people's lawns, jump onto the street, because if they don't, they'll be too close, illegally close. They avoid each other's aura. It's not safe to be human these days, which is why we have to police being human. When civilian Marty is just walking down the street, maybe just taking a stroll through the neighborhood, and he's passing by a lady, Marty just wants to look that lady in the eyes and give her the gift of a smile. He wants to say hi, but society says that's pretty creepy, huh? Marty, a man with a male gaze and a male body, can't take in the spirit of a woman on the streets. His gaze and his body are a threat. Even when Marty passes by another man, he may want to give them a smile. But that's an even stranger situation. The man gets all uncomfortable and says, "What are you looking at, buddy? Why are you looking at me?" And then they threaten to beat Marty up. Just because he wanted to take in the spirit and being of another man. He wanted to see a man as a human being. So Officer Marty has to be on high alert. He has to police civilian Marty. He has to force him to look down at the ground when he passes by another person. He has to force him to be an obedient citizen, one that never poses a threat, doesn't make people uncomfortable, becomes submissive out of fear. "Marty, you're not allowed to look at that lady, officer," Marty says. "I know she's beautiful, and she has such a powerful and interesting spirit. She might even be the one. But you have to turn away." "But what if I was passing by the beautiful and charismatic Canadian goddess and pop star Carly Rae Jepsen? What if I was passing by her in that forest where we realized we're soulmates? What if that opportunity came? What if I was given that opportunity to share a glance with her, to say hello? What if the butterflies were flying around her and they were fluttering in my tummy? As she turned to look, would the officer in my mind still force me to look down? Would I obey? Would following the laws of the officer in my mind keep me from following the laws of my heart?" But Officer Marty would step in and say, "Marty, don't you even think about it. You can't look at her, okay? You're forbidden. Do you want to threaten Carly with your gaze? Are you making her feel safe if you glance at her in this forest? Are you considering your male privilege when you brazenly and unapologetically glance at a lady as magical as Carly Rae?" No, I guess not. I guess you're right, Officer Marty. And I don't want to be a disobedient boy. And that's what the police person in our mind does, doesn't it? That's what the police people in the world do, on the streets with their gun and their badge. Whether it's physical or metaphorical, they want to police your spirit and your humanity. The police person doesn't want us to trust people, because then they would lose their power. And the police persons thrive off of our fear. So who lets these police people wander around? Who lets these police people take this authority? We do. Why? Because we're afraid. Afraid of everyday people. Afraid of people in our society who live next door, who live upstairs, downstairs. We're afraid of people we pass on the street. So we feel like we need the police persons. Instead of trusting the people around us, we trust police officers, who are, by the way, just people as well. People we've given guns to and absolute authority. Strange, huh? Why is it more convenient to trust those people who are just people like me or you? Why do we allow anyone to be police persons in this world? Why do we assume one person or group of people has the moral authority over anyone else if we're all the same? If we're all human beings? These days, Marty doesn't feel the gaze of God on him. No. He feels the gaze of society, the police persons of society looking at Marty. Their gaze is on you too. Any thought or opinion, any action or movement, any identity or self-expression, all observed for an ultimate judgment by society. A society that wants you to be an obedient citizen. So are you an obedient citizen? Do you follow the laws of your country, the rules of your social structure? Do you force yourself and others to obey the arbitrary expectations that society has? Do you obey even when your heart feels like it's wrong? Do you obey just to feel like you're part of a group? Maybe we need to defund the police in our mind. How can we get rid of this entity that wants to uphold the unofficial laws of our mind? How do we stop ourselves from looking at people and labeling them as criminals? Because criminals are people first. So for this meditation, I want you to close your eyes. As long as you aren't driving or operating heavy machinery, take a breath in and out, and in and out. I want you to imagine a prison in your mind. A space with concrete walls, no windows, bars. You feel the chill of stagnant air. You hear the groans and cries of people trapped within the sterile, hard walls of a cell. Who resides there? They certainly aren't people who stay there willingly. No. These are the people that you have imprisoned. People you have deemed unfit to be free. Maybe you saw them on the street not wearing a mask. Maybe they said something you didn't approve of online. Maybe they're of a race, religion, culture, or belief system you're afraid of, that you don't understand, or would rather not encounter. Look at the faces of these prisoners, your prisoners. What sentence are they serving? When will they be free to go? Are they ever really free from your imprisonment? Did you place them in this cell for rehabilitation or for punishment? Do you believe punishment is rehabilitation? Look in their face. Maybe it's somebody that you only gave a passing glance to, that you judged before you knew them. You cut them off from your life because you just didn't understand them. It would be nice to let them go, but maybe you feel like you can't. After all, why should you let all of these people be free when you are a prisoner in your own prison? Not only do the people that you've imprisoned reside there, but the police person in your mind does too. In order to keep an eye on those you have deemed criminals, you also have to be imprisoned, limited. And who is the police person that keeps you in prison? It's you. Do you feel the concrete walls around you? They suffocate you. It's hard to breathe. All you want to do is break free from the prison in your mind and experience the freedom of life. There's a garden in your mind that you would much rather be journeying through. But you decide to stay in this cold, lonely prison. Look at this officer in your mind, in the mirror. See their face. Do you see them peeking through the bars of the prison in your mind, trapped, longing for something more, afraid, because they don't know. They don't know the world around them, so they're afraid. They feel they must limit themselves. They feel they must limit others. That officer in your mind wants to be dismissed. They want to be let go because they want to be free to play too. They want to be free to look at people as human beings, not as criminals, not as evildoers, not as disobedient, but as loving people who have possibilities, options. But you've imprisoned them, just like you've imprisoned yourself. Marty wants you to dismiss that officer in your mind, that person who judges, that part of you that is so easy to punish, that part of you that always assumes the worst of people. Dismiss them. Get out of here. Take a breath in and out. Just let them go. And out. Ask them for their badge and their gun. Don't make it hard. Don't dishonorably discharge them, all right? They've done their duty. You brought them in to do that thing and they did their job. The problem is that the job exists in the first place. Tell them to give their badge and gun in and say that they could pick up a new hobby. Officer, you could be a chef, psychologist, an astronaut, right? An architect, whatever you want to be. You don't have to be an officer. Just give me the gun and the badge. It's okay. Take a breath in and out. They might be a little scared. It's okay. Just put your hand on theirs. Go, officer. It's time for you to go out into the garden of your mind. They look at you. They nod their head. They take a breath in and out. They feel their soul filled with possibility. They walk out that door. They walk out that police department in your mind. And once you've dismissed that officer in your mind, once they've finally been freed, these people that you once saw as criminals, that you've imprisoned, that are behind bars, can finally be seen as what they truly are. Human beings trying to figure out this world. People who just want to live their lives, enjoy their mind, body, and spirit without the limitations that you impose on them. Our world is very complicated and scary, but if we assume that every person wants to do bad, how can we truly make this world the great place that it was meant to be? Thank you for hopping aboard this spaceship for this meditation. That was a weird one. That was an interesting journey, and Marty wants to thank you for being a part of it. He hopes you took the first steps towards dismissing the police officer in your mind, because that's the first step towards finding order in this world. And as you walk down the street this week, in a world where people are scared, feeling imprisoned in their own bodies, in their own homes, just remember to breathe, to take them in, to give them a smile and a greeting, to remind them as they break out of this shell that people are good. Until next time, I'll be here, waiting, ready to meditate.